So you don't know what tennis is?
What is it?
It's a relationship.
You know, it must be pretty exciting to be so important.
Tennis player isn't so important.
Oh, but people who do things are important.
I'm George.
I'm Devyn.
And this is your 15th appointment with your Medicinema.
Today we're going to discuss two tennis-related movies with Challengers and Strangers on a Train. But beforehand, we're going to quickly talk about the Cannes Film Festival.
Yeah, Cannes happened, and we have the list of winners since a few days now. I know you are not too familiar with most of these, and obviously neither am I, because we had no chance to watch this, but there's a few interesting things that came out of this. Some more expected winners, I guess, some like bigger names, but also a few surprises. I guess the big one straight out of the way, Sean Baker won the Palme d'Or, the main prize, which I'm super happy about. I'm a big Sean Baker fan. And Nora, a movie about prostitution, about sex work, apparently, which seems up Sean Baker's alley. He has worked through similar topics before with porn actors and also even sex work itself before in Tangerine. But there's a few other things. Jesse Plemons was an interesting one. He won Best Actor, Best Performance by an Actor for Kind of Kindness, the new Yorgos Lanthimos movie. So that might be an early foreshadow for the Oscars next year. And there's also a weird thing that happened with the Best Actress category.
Yeah, so that one actually is shared by 4 actresses. Adriana Paz, Zoe Saldana, Carla Sofia Gascon, and Selena Gomez all shared that. And that's Emilie Perez, right? Directed by Jacques Audard.
Yeah, we probably butchering
all
names
of those,
left and right, but yes. Emilia Perez seems to be one of the big surprises of Cannes. I've never heard of the director before, but it's one of the highest rated movies coming out of the festival now. It also won, I think, the third place jury prize in the Palme d'Or in the main competition. So that's an interesting one that's already waiting on my watch list now. Another smaller surprise at the festival was The Substance, directed by Caroline Fargeet. I'm butchering that for sure. It's a horror film that won Best Screenplay and is another one of those super highly rated movies of Cannes this year. Yeah, I guess the last thing to point out as well is the winner of Un Certain Regard, the side competition at Cannes, which features smaller movies and directorial debuts. Black Dog won that, directed by Guan Hu, a Chinese man that fled, I believe. I don't think he lives in China anymore. And it's apparently about this guy finding a black dog, sitting it in the side compartment, and both of them drive with the motorcycle through the Gobi Desert together. So
I would really like to see that one, honestly.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. Quite a few, all of those mentioned, honestly. But yeah, that's pretty much all we can say about it. Those seem to be like some of the more exciting ones. There were some, I guess, negative surprises. The Shrouds, the new David Cronenberg movie, got horrible reviews, like really ripped apart by the critics. Megalopolis by Francis Ford Coppola got mixed reviews. Some love it, some seem to hate it. And Kinds of Kindness, the new Yorgos Lanthimos, seems to be good, but nowhere near as exciting or like special as Poor Things was. So that was Cannes 2024. And now we're going back in time about 70 years to Strangers on a Train. It is the 1951 released Alfred Hitchcock noir classic. It follows Guy and Bruno, played by Farley Granger and Robert Walker, who, after a random encounter on the train, end up being entangled in a murder plot together. Bruno, convinced Guy will return the favor, kills Guy's wife after she won't divorce him. Guy, on the other hand, didn't take Bruno's scheme too seriously in the first place and mainly tries to get away without being convicted himself. A suspenseful standoff ensues as Bruno tries to plant evidence that would connect Guy to the murder, and Guy tries to stop him beforehand. Devyn, tell me about your experience with Strangers on a Train.
Oh man, so I'm not sure if I had seen this previously or this movie has just influenced that many things. I know it's listed somewhere as like the 73rd most influential film of all time or something like that.
I could see that, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of movies that almost have this exact plot. I've seen a lot of episodes of TV shows that kind of have this plot. This is like one of those classic kind of stories. Famously, Don't Throw Mama from the Train, the Danny DeVito movie. This is basically the same thing. In fact, he watches this movie on TV in that movie. So it's clearly clearly very, very taken from that. It's so funny because, I suggested this because I was like, oh, it's like a murder movie that also has tennis people in it. So,
Mhm.
I'll suggest that movie. And I had no other thought about what it was. And then I watched it and like 5 minutes in, I was like, I know everything that's about to happen in this. And I don't remember why at all. I don't know. This was just a familiar, classic kind of tale to me, real folksy kind of tale. It's just so what's gonna happen. It was really well executed, but I was not surprised by any of it.
Yeah, it's kind of a hindsight thing, I think. Because, yeah, you're absolutely right. This is one of those stories that even if you haven't seen the movie, it's kind of this 12 Angry Men phenomenon where you already know the plot of the movie despite not knowing the movie.
It's exactly. I was almost gonna say it's like 12 Angry Men all over again.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those. As we'll get to later on, it's still influencing movies to this day. For sure, there's very direct quotes of this movie in Challengers. Yeah, I like this a lot. I can already say that it's by far not my favorite Hitchcock, but it's still incredibly well put together. I also recently got gifted a book, Hitchcock Truffaut, it's called. It's an infamous book where Truffaut kind of locked himself into a hotel room together with Hitchcock and held an 8-day-long interview. And they go through his entire filmography, which I took as an excuse to read up on the part where they talk about Strangers on a Train as well.
Okay, I was looking up that interview. Yeah, I like Hitchcock. I have a little Hitchcock action figure.
You have a Hitchcock action figure?
I do. Yeah, a little figurine guy that like hangs out by my TV.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, I like Hitchcock. Yeah, this movie's comfy. That's my big thing with this movie is it's very like there's something about ones that are like that timeless kind of tale that are just comfortable, like comfort food films. And this was one of those without needing to, like, without me knowing it was going to be one. I really, really liked that about it.
Mm.
But yeah, we can get on into the meat of this film if you want.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think where I should start with what I want to talk about. Yeah, I could either start with like more general theme stuff and visuals, or
You can go themes, honestly, it's totally fine.
yeah, this is honestly going to be, to me, almost like more of a setup for the challenges discussion later on, because a lot of the things that I'm about to like explain or like discuss are pretty well known they are not like new revelations and interpretations of this. There's so much writing on existing on this movie and
There
so much
is.
analysis.
There is. I just want to say real quick too, is I looked up into some of that. It's one of those things where it's like, I can tell that this story is a timeless story and it lasts well in a lot of ways. And I can tell why it's a good movie visually in a lot of ways. But man, this movie has been analyzed to hell and back. Like,
Yeah,
people talk about like the color compositions in the film and stuff. I'm like, it's a black and white movie. Color compositions were
that's interesting. I've never heard the color side of things. That's interesting.
Yeah, there's like a whole thing talking about the use of darkness toward the end of the film and how much use of light is in the beginning of the film, and it like showing
Interesting.
like the character's descent into darkness almost as he's like starting to do more and more bad things.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's all kinds of shit. It's weird. There's a lot of splitting the atoms with this movie.
I guess to our purposes, the most interesting and pressing interpretation or like motif in this is the doubles motif.
Yep. Yeah, that's
Have you read into that?
I did a little bit. I didn't really understand what they were trying to make a point of, because at one point it seems like they contradict themselves with the doubles also being their opposites. So yeah, no, if you want to put that in a explainable term, go for it.
Yeah, I will try. It's a little vague, and you're absolutely right. People read it in different ways, but it's definitely like for sure there's something intended here by Hitchcock. Like there's way too much of this theme or this idea in this for it not to be valid. There's a lot of ways that doubles appear in this movie, either working together or against each other in crossings. And this particularly is like the way it's symbolized whenever it's working against each other. So from like the very beginning of the movie, we have the mirrored images of when the two characters get introduced. We only see their feet and we cut from one person to the other, and they are absolutely mirroring each other, both arriving with a taxi, both having like a butler with them that carries the luggage. They are framed the same way, just mirrored, and that all continues like this until they meet on the train and their feet touch. So they quite literally collide with each other. They run into each other. So we have those, I guess, two sides of a coin is how most people look at it. And then the question from there becomes, does this mean it's two sides of one personality? So like they reflect the different sides of one person? Or is it more like a good and bad thing? I have my thoughts on it, but we'll get to it later. There's a lot more showing this dual side thing. So first of all, we have the tennis match in general, a literal game between two people, a back and forth, two sides of the same coin again. We have a bunch of stuff like Bruno ordering doubles all the time whenever he drinks something. And more particularly, we have then the way to lead into this whole when they cross each other, we have the double crossings of guy accuses his wife of that when she doesn't want to divorce him anymore. He accuses her of a double crossing. We have the whole guy not following up on what Bruno saw as his promise of also killing for him, killing the father. So that's another double crossing. The whole crossing thing comes more frequently as well. We have the general interaction between them. You could see as their life paths randomly crossing. You know, they didn't plan to meet this person. It's just a coincidence that they ended up here. Bruno also calls their whole plan a crisscross. That happens several times. The moment they even meet on the train, that I already pointed out where their feet touch, Hitchcock cuts to the rails, to a shot of outside of the train where it just crosses the rails. So that's a
Okay.
quite literal image of that.
Wow.
Yeah, there's really it's all over the place. The doubles and the crosses are just everywhere. So the question then really becomes: is it meant as, like, some people see this as a quite straightforward? Bruno is the bad guy. Guy is the good guy. Bruno is the one following up on, his murderous ideas, and Guy is just the one who doesn't take him seriously and just ends up in the situation without him participating in any of this. Do you see it that way, Devyn? Or do you think there's like more to the story?
I mean, I think it's hard because the standards are almost different. How do I put this? When this was made, I could see how Guy is the good guy in this situation,
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like by today's standards, he's still kind of the asshole too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so like I don't know. I think that time changes that a little bit, No, I think he definitely is supposed to represent, the good side of this, because I knew kind of what was happening when I watched it. I watched, how he was going to dismiss
Bruno?
Bruno. Thank you, Bruno. How he dismisses Bruno on the train when Bruno initially basically tells him the idea,
Mhm.
and he's just like, "Yeah, buddy, sure, buddy." And his signals are so clear of just like, "Get away from me, you crazy motherfucker."
Yeah.
It's just so clear. I don't know necessarily if he's supposed to be good or bad. If more is he's just supposed to be the every person, the average person, the you, the me, the we think we're good but we make mistakes guy.
Mm.
Bruno represents this crazy what if,
Yeah.
This crazy wrench thrown into the average person's life.
One reading of it all that I quite enjoyed, that I think I'm on board with, is that whilst obviously Bruno is, the one acting on everything, and Guy is more the guy who reacts to everything. We also see this in the beginning, I believe. I'm pretty sure we constantly see Bruno's side of the visuals first, and then Hitchcock cuts to Guy's feet, for example, second, almost in a like action reaction way. But whilst that being true, I do believe there is more nuance to that, and that it's also intended to be more nuanced, even like back then. First of all, we obviously have the whole side of it where Guy, even without acting on it, still verbally communicates the wish for the wife's death. Even the particular way in which Bruno does it, saying out loud, "I could strangle her right now," as the image cuts to Bruno holding his hands out and kind of like almost in a mimic way, training or preparing, I guess, for his murder of Guy's wife.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also, by the way, that cut, that specific one of Guy saying the thing that Bruno acts on, is one of the indicators or like hints that people point towards to when they say they are supposed to represent one mind being split or whatever. What I, however, think is the stronger indicator of Guy not feeling innocent himself, like that's the big one, I think, is the scene when Bruno tells Guy that the murder had happened already, that he's done it, that he just returned from the carnival. He visits Guy, which in a super ridiculous way absolutely like negates all the advantage of the plan to begin with. Like that was
By connecting yourself with them immediately.
Yeah, immediately from the crime scene,
Yeah.
walks up to Guy's home, not even coordinated in any way. So like the whole idea was that Guy would have an alibi and couldn't like be there at the time, but he didn't even know when it's gonna happen. So like Bruno's whole plan is stupid to begin with. I just wanted to point that out. So but,
it's a terrible plan.
yeah, awful. It's really not the perfect murder that he envisions. However, that scene where he arrives there and talks to Guy and tells him about it, the second the police comes up, like they arrive at Guy's door also, they already talked about, obviously, how Guy tries to incriminate him as well, and how Guy couldn't get away from this, so he has to follow up on his side of the deal. That's Bruno's stance on this all. I don't fully buy that. I think, like, the moment the police arrive right there, I think Guy could just walk out and be like, hey, here's the murder. Fucking get him. He just told me like seconds ago. I know why you're here. Please, and you know, give all the context, and it would be probably a while for everything to work out, but he still has the alibi of being on the train. Or like, it's not worse if he tells them, you know, it's either way. And he can give context, he can pinpoint Bruno to the date, he can probably find someone who saw him there. You know, things would work out. But Guy's reaction to the police arriving is hiding together with Bruno behind the fence and waiting for the police to leave. And that fence, to me, is super important because imagery-wise, it's literal iron bars. Both of them hide behind. So in that scene, Guy kind of sees himself on the same page as he sees Bruno. Both of them think of themselves as not innocent in the situation. I think Guy thinks of himself as being partially responsible for this all.
Damn. I mean, that's a much deeper well than mine is. I like it. I don't know if I quite agree. Like I said, I think, I don't know. I'm not, you know, as deep of an analyzer into certain things like that as you are. And I know Hitchcock always really liked to have interesting and connective details in film. But I also know that he was kind of a silly guy. It wouldn't surprise me if sometimes Hitchcock did certain things in movies because he just was like, I thought that was interesting and funny and neat. And then people come up with like 1,000 like deeper reasons that it exists, which doesn't, you know, because meaning is inferred from the art to each person, right? So that still has that meaning.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder how much with something like Strangers on a Train, it was just like, how many times can I fit doubles in it? Because that one doubles joke about tennis. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. I like that a lot though, but I'm not sure if I quite agree.
Yeah, I'm like, again, I'm also mixed on this one. Like, with everything I read up on Rear Window and how I tried to like add on to that and dissect that myself, I was pretty sure that's intended all by Hitchcock. Here, I know that he intended something. Like, I'm sure of it, this isn't just random, but I'm also not sure that Hitchcock might just, as you have just pointed out, have been like, yeah, tennis is about two people. Let's make everything about twos in this movie and put as much of the doubles as I can in it, just for lols. I could see Hitchcock do that for sure. Still, super, super interesting to think about. There's one more reading of this all, of the doubles, that is, I think, like the most cynical towards Guy, because some people read it all as Guy actually being just as bad or like the actual bad guy of this film, and he kind of uses this disturbed man to murder for him, basically, and get away with it by the end. And the perfect murder did in fact happen. It was just Guy that got away with the perfect murder of his wife. And there's one line in particular that people point towards when talking about this reading of the film that is happening in the tennis match. The announcer talks about the two players, and I think we only cut there once he starts talking about Guy. So we don't even see the second person or hear about the second person in the match. But people also pointed out that that match really isn't about Guy playing against the second person, but in his mind, playing against time, or more directly playing against the ticking clock that is Bruno. So Bruno is on his mind and is really his opposing force in that scene, despite him having another opponent. However, what I wanted to get at is the announcer announces Guy as, on the other hand, we have Guy Haynes. He's a quiet, methodical player. And I know he goes on for a while then describing like his play style and the way he works in tennis. But people saw this as the quiet, methodical player, as like the quiet, methodical person within this murderous duo, and how he, kind of leans back, lets the other guy do it, and then in the right moment basically attacks and ends up, leaving this whole thing as the winner, with Bruno being dead and him being the innocent man. This is the reading I'm least convinced of.
Yeah, nah. No. I mean, so like, I could see a version of this story where that happens. Not this movie, but I could see how somebody could twist this story into another movie or into a whatever, and that's the outcome. For sure.
I think it's close enough where you could make a fan edit of this movie where it comes across that way. Like, I think there's enough here
absolutely.
where you could rearrange stuff a bit, and then it would feel like that's the intended solution, or like the intended thing that's going on. But yeah, I don't fully feel it here.
So this is based on a book.
Mhm.
The two biggest differences with the book and this are that Bruno dies in a boating accident and not on a merry-go-round, like, whole situation, like he dies in an actual accident.
Mhm.
And Guy actually does kill Bruno's dad.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he does. And then he is entrapped by the detective by the end. The writer, wait, is that the writer? Yeah, Paul Mulligan said, Guy became a decent guy who refuses to carry out his part of the crazed bargain, just to head off the censors. So the writer was like, they changed my damn book to make it better for the people or whatever. He's just mad at the censors. They're censoring my book. That's how I felt about Ironclaw, man. I get it, Paul Mulligan.
Talking about censors, actually, one thing that I wanted to also mention, again, it's one of those many readings that exist about this movie, and I'm not fully sure that I believe that reading. Like, I would need to rewatch it with that reading in mind and kind of try to find more evidence that supports it. But some people, and I think Luca Guadagnino might be one of those people that reads it that way, think that this is a story about two homosexual men that Hitchcock made just in the Hays Code era, and due to that he couldn't make it explicit or more direct, and it's all just like layered in metaphors.
I do not see that.
There's one that's really pointing towards it that I kind of like, other than the fact that Bruno is very much kind of stalking Guy starting from the murder, and is really obsessed with him, constantly around him, constantly trying to get into his life, trying to influence him, so that's a very clear thing. There's no way around that, and I'm gonna give him that. But the one scene that is a little bit more direct is at the party setting, Bruno tells Guy, I don't know what the setup is exactly, but he tells him, I really like you, Guy. And that's the moment that Guy kind of freaks out and punches him directly in the face. And people see that as like a, suppressed gay man not being okay with, we can't show those emotions. We can't get into those emotions. You can't like me.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like that. I kind of, because that is a very out of character moment for Guy. We have never seen him before too aggressively, I think. At least I can't recall a moment where he becomes really aggressive before that. And it is kind of unprovoked. Like, yeah, obviously Bruno is acting weird, but he's been acting weird the whole time and has been like an awkward stalker the whole time. But that scene in particular, he didn't provoke him really. And the one thing he said was, I like you. I think that's interesting. And I'm not fully convinced that it applies fully or that Hitchcock intended it. But I know that Hitchcock definitely, and we already pointed this out in Rear Window when we talked about the phallic symbol of the big camera lens in his lap and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So Hitchcock is very much hiding stuff like that, sexual innuendos in his movies. And he was very much limited of how far he could go with that because it was the era of the Hays Code. So those are just straight up facts. And I wanted to mention that theory at least exists because it's going to be more important in the Challengers discussion later on. Because I am at least convinced that Luca Guadagnino sees this movie as that.
Very fair. So what I'm totally getting out of this is that Hitchcock was obsessed with dicks, but the man got him down.
Yes. That's a good way to put it.
No, that's funny though. But no, on that, okay. I want to layer it back a little bit.
Mhm.
I want to talk about, I guess, how do you put it? Not the influence, I guess a little bit the influence that this movie is that besides all these things that make it such a deeper story and stuff, at its whole, it's a very what if kind of story. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That was, a big predominant thing of that era, like Twilight Zone and stuff like that. Even Alfred Hitchcock's own television series was very a what if type show.
Yeah. Hitchcock Presents.
Yeah, Hitchcock Presents. Yeah, exactly. And this is very quintessential. Like, this is like as if you were to try to like distill that type of show or that type of premise down. This is like one of the most perfect ones. What if somebody you could kill anybody? Who would it be? Just as a writing tool, I know that Hitchcock didn't write this as apparently a book, right? Still, this is the vehicle that it was presented to the world. Really, was this movie?
He doesn't have a credit, I think. Yeah, he has no credit, but as far as I understand the process, Hitchcock was heavily involved in the adapting process. Like he
probably
sat
is,
together with the writer and he questioned every decision of the screenplay basically and like tried to turn it around and trying to find weak spots within the story and giving notes left and right.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But yeah, it's such an awesome just like piece of story history that has affected so many other stories and films. I mean, I mentioned the Danny DeVito one earlier. It's so funny how much I want to talk about 12 Angry Men in comparison. In
Yeah.
the type of ripples it is, right? Because it's the same exact situation that I had with 12 Angry Men, where there isn't a list that I can find, but I bet you could make one of all of the television shows that have had an episode that was directly like parodying or,
Yeah.
redoing this movie. I feel like there's like a Hannah Montana version of this or something. Do you know what I mean? Like it's that kind of like steeped, and I think that's just such a wonderful thing to have that and be able to reflect back on the original one, and the original is still pretty interesting.
I quickly want to point out that's also the case absolutely for Rear Window, the other Hitchcock film we discussed. And I just yesterday I watched Civil War by Alex Garland, and there's Rear Window quotes in that, like straight up again.
That's so funny.
Another movie in conversation with Rear Window. So yeah, it's everywhere. Hitchcock can't be. He's in the fabric of film everywhere. I guess this would be a good point to briefly talk about the book, where I also like got a few behind the scenes things. It's a good point because the book itself might be a huge reason that today Hitchcock has this influence in the first place. This book, like this infamous interview that Truffaut did with Hitchcock, I think it was like early 60s or something. So towards the end of Hitchcock's career, he was already not too healthy. I think he did like 3 films afterwards or something like that, and started a 4th. That's around the time frame we're talking. So almost all of his big classics already released at that point. And still, American critics didn't take Hitchcock seriously up until then. They looked at Hitchcock as a mainstream blockbuster director, basically, as a guy for the wide audience, but no depth, no, all surface level. They didn't think too highly of Alfred Hitchcock, whilst at the same time, in Europe and particularly in France, critics thought highly of Hitchcock. Like they talked about him as one of the big author directors next to Bergman. And Truffaut, again and again, as a French critic and director himself, was asked by his American counterparts of, why do you take Hitchcock so seriously? Like, there's nothing to it. What's going on here? And he was so annoyed by that he decided, like, someone needs to write like a definitive work and analysis of Hitchcock so that people finally understand his genius. And that's how this whole book came to be. And this book absolutely did that. Like, this book is considered one of the major reasons that Hitchcock nowadays, has the status that he has and has the influence that he has, because he showed people that, there's a lot going on here and there's a lot of thought in every little detail, and Hitchcock is actually a master of his craft. So, talking about all the influence he had, Truffaut is part of why he had that influence.
That's super cool. I never knew that.
They talked about briefly some behind the scenes stuff. The shot of the man crawling under the carousel. Hitchcock said he would never ever do something like that again, because that was an actual carousel, and the guy would have just, if he made one wrong move and lifted his head too highly, he might not have survived that. Like that was one of the most dangerous moments in Hitchcock's entire career. And some of the other shots where it actually breaks apart are miniatures composed into the shot. So that's also interesting. And I didn't pick up on it being miniatures whilst watching it. So that was super well done. I love that.
The merry-go-round is also not in the book. That's taken from Edmund Crispin's The Moving Toy Shop, which is a different book. But everything that happens in that, the guy getting shot, the merry-go-round going crazy, the guy crawling underneath it, all of that happens in Crispin's book, and he received no credit.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Walker, the guy who played Bruno, died just a few weeks after this movie's release. At the age of 32. Yeah.
Holy shit.
He had an alcohol problem and depression, apparently. His housekeeper found him late at night, super out of it emotionally, and called the psychiatrist, who sedated him. And apparently, like, he didn't wake up the next morning. So a combination of the alcohol and the sedative.
What the fucking shit? Oh, no, that sucks. What?
Yeah.
Hey, man, you seem really down, but we want to help you, so we're going to put you down.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Don't be sad in the 50s, folks.
Yeah.
Damn. That sucks. What was that dude's name? Did you say?
Robert Walker.
Wow.
They also remarked about the importance of time in this movie. You have Guy who wants to win the tennis match as fast as possible. You have Bruno who dropped the lighter and can't get it out quickly enough for so that Guy doesn't catch up to him. The carousel itself is speeding up, and even on like a meta level of the film, you have those shots being quite literally sped up. Just
I hate those sped up shots. I'm not gonna lie.
yeah, it didn't age too well
No,
because
they
we're
aged so
kind of
badly.
used to how
Oh my God.
stuff looks, and yeah,
It's not even
it's very
that.
noticeable.
It's not even that, because if you look at the way, say, if you can picture in your head how in the 90s they would have reshot that exact scene. There's like editing techniques to do like fast motion that we don't still do today. You know, like we would say a movie done in, say, the 2000s that does that scene. We would look back and be like, there's so many cuts in
Mhm.
this. And that's because
Yeah.
that's how a lot of 2000s movies tried to show action, was how many cuts can you put in it to show pace or whatever, right?
And in a similar fashion, you could even talk about slow-mo in the 2000s, because sometimes they would just
Yeah.
like slow down 24 FPS footage and to 12 FPS, and it's super choppy, but that was just a way to do slow-mo back then.
Exactly. And like those are like technical limitations, right? That like I get that. I get that. My problem with the shots of the everything speeding up like in this is that they look like Benny Hill to me. Oh man, you have no idea who Benny Hill is.
No.
Do you know in movies or TV when a scene happens and it's like people are being chased or they're chasing each other around
Oh
and
yeah,
it speeds
I
up?
absolutely not. Just yeah.
Yeah, that's like a specific comedian, Benny Hill, and that was like a bit he did all the time. And that's just what it feels like. It just feels like you're fucking Benny. Like
Mhm.
that circus music should start playing. Like I just can't take it seriously because of that. It's not even the technical limitation of it or whatever. It's just
Yeah,
that's
it's
the impression I get.
the added context of just knowing that kind of effect in a comedic setting.
That whole scene's cool, but do you have more book things you want to go and do?
Oh no, those were like the major ones. They also talked about casting a bit, and how, just for context, this is the era where studios had actors under contracts. So
Yeah.
an actress would only appear ever in Warner Bros. Movies, and another actress would only appear in Universal movies because they had exclusive contracts for them. Ruth Roman, who played Anne Morton in this, the senator's daughter, was at the time the big star of, I think it was Warner Brothers. Yeah, of Warner Brothers. So Hitchcock basically had no choice but to take her. She was like kind of forced upon him in this movie, and he didn't like her performance. So that's an interesting little side of, the way history affected this movie.
Was he part of he was part of the scripting team, you think, right? Hitchcock?
He has no credit, but I know from like the book and the way he talked about it that he was involved in the story itself. Yeah.
Okay. But I was gonna say that the cigarette lighter, Miriam's eyeglasses, those are things that weren't really in the book at all, and the amusement park was only like briefly in the book.
Mm-hmm.
That was all decisions made by the scripting team to change that around and stuff.
Since you brought up the cigarette lighter, there's also a cross with that, and with the same symbol also on Guy's suit. It has the symbol of two tennis rackets crossed, like both on the suit and on the cigarette lighter.
I didn't notice that's what that was. Very nice.
I have a few more very small little moments. I love the way the murder itself is staged, like that we see it through the reflection of the glasses that had fallen off of her. Like it's kind of this, we are watching it and we are looking through the glasses, but no one is wearing those glasses, so there's no witness really. Like it's quite literal, a no witness murder, and portrayed through glasses that have no one that wears them. That's a super cool imagery to me.
I didn't think about it like that. Just those glasses were so crazy. I cannot
Yeah, they were super.
imagine how heavy those glasses were.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And one final image that I also liked a lot is that scene where Guy is walking around the city, I think with his girlfriend, with Anne Morton, and you see Bruno standing menacingly in the background as like the small figure on the steps, and almost like this. It's almost like the slasher trope, just that slashers didn't even exist then. And I wonder if like the first slashers that like established this kind of trope of the murderer standing menacingly small in the background, and we can see him, but some of the characters can't. I wonder if that was inspired by Strangers on a Train as well. Because it is, to a very similar degree, the same context. It is a murder, it is the scary person standing there in the background, and some of the people in the foreground have no idea what's even going on, that there is this imminent danger lurking.
That's a good observation. There's a couple, like, I wish I could think of a more than just, obviously Psycho, but I know, like, Dial for M for Murder a little bit, and Frenzy. There's some things in those movies that could be extrapolated as things that became parts of the slasher genre.
Mm-hmm.
So, it wouldn't surprise me if there's more things throughout Hitchcock's body of work, including this movie, that kind of helped add up to that.
Mm-hmm. Lovely, lovely film, lovely piece of work.
Yeah.
From the influential, we move on to the influenced, I guess. Challengers 2024. New Luca Guadagnino movie. The Italian is back after Bones and all.
It follows Mike Faist and Josh O'Connor as Art and Patrick in a love triangle with Tashi, played by Zendaya. The story is told non-linear, mostly focusing on the 2 times the boys played tennis against each other, 12 years apart, both times fighting for the heart of Tashi. The first time all 3 of them are young, talented players seemingly destined to be greats. In the later point in time, Tashi manages the super successful Art after ending her own career due to an injury. They are also married with a kid. Patrick, on the other hand, is struggling to pay bills with his tennis career whilst having an unfinished business to attend with both Tashi and Art. You love this movie.
Initially, after the first watch, I wasn't sure if I love it as much as like a lot of the audiences do. This is a highly celebrated movie. It's probably safe to assume that it's the most critically acclaimed movie of the year so far. After a rewatch and thinking about it more and trying to, dissect themes and stuff like that, I am getting closer to loving it as much, I gotta say. Yeah, I enjoyed this a lot. I not only don't have any issues with the soundtrack, which is a big problem for quite a few people. I adore the way it is used. I think it's super unique. It was an experience that I didn't have before, quite like it. And I don't think it ever distracted me or like took away from any of the experience. So that worked for me. Yeah, I overall very, very positive on this side. But go ahead, Devyn. Tell me what you didn't enjoy about this.
Well, we'll get it out of the way, I guess, with this, is that I can recognize that this movie is incredibly well made, obviously. I can recognize that there's a lot going on in this film. I'm not a film critic, but I'm a host on a podcast about films. So, like, I definitely am trying to be out there with movies. But even the most, like, diverse critics have, spots in film where they're just like, that's not my area of expertise. That's not my wheelhouse, This was an amazing cake. I hate cake. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is not like a matter of like, it's that the movie is bad or I had problems necessarily with the movie. I just didn't find it interesting in any way. It left me completely bored.
Mhm.
It's just not my thing. My first note, because you and a mutual friend of ours were like, it's not really about tennis though. And my first note is a lot more about tennis than I was led to believe.
Yeah, it's it's tough to describe because it simultaneously is a lot about tennis, but it also isn't.
I said to our mutual friend, I said that it's about three people's power play love.
Mm-hmm.
Or love through power plays, right? Or a relationship through power plays,
Mm-hmm.
as told through the vehicle of tennis and tennis playing, because that's what they're obsessed with and their world is about. And he goes, yeah, it's not really like a tennis movie. It's not a tennis movie in the same, or like a sports film in the way that most sports films have like a big game at the end. Everything culminates to like the big game, and are they going to win? Or are they not going to win? That's a big thing in a lot of sports films. And this doesn't have that. I don't watch enough sports movies to know that that's different than a sports movie. This is just a sports movie to me, but with like a lot of not fucking. A lot of almost fucking.
Yeah. And we're going to get to that, yeah?
We're going to get to that for sure. Is the analogy about how playing tennis is also as unsatisfying as almost fucking? No. No, but... No, so I do recognize a lot of the great things about this movie. Once you start, I know you've got a million notes right now.
I have.
I've only got like 5, so I'll pepper them in.
My biggest problem right now is that I don't know where to start.
Well, my first note other than that was, why do tennis people dress exactly like tennis people? So I don't think you have something to jump from there.
Oh, I actually have a little note.
Oh my god. That's fucking great.
There's a fun little thing that I just randomly stumbled upon while researching this movie. Apparently, Luca Guadagnino movies are super influential in the fashion world, actually. The same thing happened with Bones and All, and now it's happening again to Challengers. All of the time period clothing that they wear, so both the tennis clothing stuff and also just like the general t-shirts that they wear, the I Told Ya or something like that, all of those costumes basically you can find used online for several $100s now. Like, those are highly valued clothing items now since the music, so much. Since the movie released. Yeah,
that's like some of the worst fashion I can think of. Oh my god, everything is so pastel.
Yeah, I just think it's super funny that Guadagnino has that kind of influence on a topic that is really not the center of attention of this movie, or Bones and All, the movie before, where the same thing happened to all of those summer clothing that they were wearing.
I mean, people, that's a big part of films, though. Mm-hmm. It really is. It is, people really pull off that a lot. I mean, if you don't base your fashion on your music, what do you base it on? Your movies?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, fair enough. One cute little nerdy detail that quite a lot of people pointed out already, but I thought I wanted to mention it. Their names, Art, Tashi, Patrick, spell out ATP, which is like the big international tennis league.
That is cute. I like that, though. It's nerdy.
Yeah, it is nerdy. There's this Strangers on a Train quote, quite like in the first 5 minutes, I think, of the movie. One of the most famous shots of Strangers on the Train, where Bruno sits in the crowd and the crowd looks left and right following the tennis match, and Bruno just stares at us front and center and menacingly in the center. Mm-hmm. And you have that very same shot with Zendaya pretty much opening the movie of the matches going on, and she's just staring in the middle of it.
I did notice that.
What essays in generally point towards and how they think this movie is in communication with Strangers on a Train is relating to that binary nature of tennis, to the Hays Code and the way Hitchcock had to hide things and couldn't address them directly whenever they were in relationship to sexuality. And with this movie very much not being out of that era, but having a similar way it talks about sexuality, as in it doesn't. Like, this is using tennis almost as a metaphor for sex, the way Hitchcock would have done back then. a lot of the tennis scenes are really the substitutes for the sex scenes that we don't get in this film. They are filmed in hyper close-ups with slow-mo, with like sweat dripping down their faces. They are super, super sexualized tennis scenes, really. There's also the line in the movie early on when Zendaya literally says tennis is a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It quite overtly tells you that this is how at least she thinks about it. And in relation to something that I mentioned earlier on with the tennis match that we see in Strangers on the Train is not really of guy playing against his opponent on the other side of the tennis court. It's more about guy playing against the third party outside of the tennis match. And Guadagnino here goes further with that and kind of directly addresses that this isn't a match about two people anymore. This has a third component that is influencing all of this from the outside. This isn't a strict match of tennis anymore and goes more directly into that. There's also interesting things that happen here with how the tennis matches kind of mirror the character dynamics. So we have one single point in the movie, namely the beginning of the story, or like time-wise the story, where the two boys are completely in sync with each other. They are not fighting against each other. They are, just bantering and having fun and hanging out. And that is before they meet Tashi at that tennis tournament. And that is also the only time the two of them play a double and are quite literally, even within the context of tennis, on one page, fighting for the same cause and not against each other. He also expands on the idea of the way you watch the match or don't watch the match and the head stays still, namely in the match where the boys watch Tashi or Zendaya for the first time. They kind of watch her in 3 stages. In the first stage, they are, normally watching the match, head going left to right, following the action. In the second stage, we see them still follow the match to a degree, but their heads stay on Tashi's side for like 70% of the game, and then they very quickly just glimpse over at the second person before they hit the ball and quickly return to Tashi, up until the final stage where they solely watch Tashi and don't really care for the match anymore. It's kind of taking the idea of the visual in Strangers on a Train and playing with it further, and fucking amazing visual storytelling, really, because no one, like the boys don't really talk about Tashi in that moment. They don't exchange like, oh yeah, she's so sexy or whatever. Nothing of that is needed, because just through that visual of how they watch that match, a clear dynamic is established of both of those guys are madly into Tashi.
Man, I wish I found this that engaging. Like they're, like I get it, I get what's happening, but yeah, the depth of looking into like the stages of it happening and stuff, very well. Man, I wish I had the love of this movie when I was watching it to pick up on those things.
Speaking of some of the visual storytelling in this, there's also another moment that I really loved of visual storytelling when in the later timeline, so the timeline of the actual Challengers tournament where the name comes from, I guess one of the meanings, obviously, they are challengers in their own regards for Tashi. But in the setup for the Challengers tournament, we see Patrick obviously sleep in his car, having no money for a hotel or whatever, and sitting there with the front desk lady, eating her bagel because she saw he was hungry, whilst she tells him about Art showing up, Art being a wild card last second candidate in the tournament. And the way she does this is not by her just using words. The way she does it is she gets up, goes to the gift shop, and takes the racket that is literally sponsored with Art's face on it. That little interaction and the contrast, the visual contrast of Patrick just eating away at that bagel that he couldn't afford even, contrasted to his former best buddy being sold as a racket in the gift shop of the same building, literally meters next to him, told so much about their dynamic, where they stand financially, without one word being mentioned. And yeah, fantastic. that's amazing storytelling.
It is good visual storytelling. I'm still like mad at these characters.
You're mad at the characters just because they are like unlikable people.
Oh man, I mean, there's a specific moment. I mean, I don't mind actually jumping ahead a little bit. It fits the theme of non-linear storytelling. I'll jump ahead just for a second here.
Mm-hmm.
Later, he's on that date in the hotel, and he's like fucking off on the date and talking to Zendaya's character for a minute, right?
Mm.
It was that moment that I realized I wrote, I hate all of these people in the least enjoyable way. I'm not against watching movies where I hate people. I prefer a movie where the main character is flawed.
Mm-hmm.
Even in happier or like upbeat movies, I prefer a flawed character. I like movies where people are terrible sometimes, that's okay. But there's like a fun type, like not a fun, but you know what I mean.
I know
it's
what
enjoyable
you mean,
to
yeah.
watch a terrible character sometimes. In this, I just hated these people, and I didn't like any decisions that any of these people made in this movie. Don't make any sense to me. Just that alone, right? Their fight over her from the beginning is fucking weird to me, because I'm not really sure how old they're made out to be when they meet her, but it feels like they're made out to be in their mid-20s.
No,
at least.
They are going to Stanford like right after that. Like that's basically the summer before they either go to university or they try to become pro. Like that's the setup for the dialogue at the beach.
Okay.
So they are like 18, 19, something like that.
That's fair then. Because at first it feels like they're older than Zendaya, and it feels weird that they're like hounding after, like, they mentioned like she's fresh 18 at one point, like really early on or whatever, and I was like, oh god. But their fight in general over her, like, she's like very quickly a terrible person.
Oh yeah.
It's just so like unenjoyable to watch terrible people just lust after other terrible people. Already where we're at, I'm like, I hate these people so much. God, I hate these characters.
Mm. There's a part of the being in conversation with strangers on a train and thinking those ideas further, where tennis could represent here the limitations of relationships in our society, particularly considering that it's, also in conversation with the Hays Code and not showing sex scenes, despite it being able to, despite its possibility nowadays. The binary nature of tennis, of just two people being involved, and even, side coaching. So a coach literally standing on the side and giving notes is illegal in tennis. That would be against the rules. So it's quite literally a sport where it's against the rules to involve a third person. And people looked at that as kind of a representation of heteronormative relationships.
It's also super cheesy, but it is also a sport in which the scoring system is called love.
Yeah, true. I didn't even pick up on that. Yeah, true. Yeah, 0 is love.
That's silly, but a little cheesy, a little on the nose. It is, reality. It is reality, yeah.
You could even look at it as no points is the love, because love is not really like her goal in any of this. I don't think she loves Art or Patrick. To her, all of this is just a means of getting to her
tennis.
goal. Yeah, she loves tennis. What people pointed towards with the heteronormative binary nature of tennis and of their relationships is that there is a good chance that, the supposed homosexuality undertones of Strangers on a Train is what Luca Guadagnino took here and took it further. Not only are they in love with Tashi, but they would kind of be in love with each other, the boys, and they just, within their horizon, it isn't allowed. It is against the rules. There's no third person allowed. Relationships are like tennis. In tennis, the third person can't exist. Pointing towards that would be stuff like they mention in that first night with Tashi, that, Patrick taught Art how to jerk off.
Oh my God.
Literally in the same room, and they were comfortable with each other being present whilst their quite literal first sexual encounter. So there's this idea that if tennis is like kind of a representation of sex here, and tennis matches are sex scenes, the final scene, has implications as well of being kind of the threesome that wasn't in the beginning.
Yeah, that leads my fourth note. They need way more alcohol for this fucking mutual masturbation story. Oh my God. They were way too sober to share that shit. No way. What? No. Disbelief. I'm sorry.
That's part of it, they are kind of nonchalant about it. And when they talk about it, Patrick even has this grin as if he is proud of that moment.
He is. There's a lot of movies where there's, gay coded things or gay analogy to what's happening in the film. This movie for sure has this. Some people make it try to apply it to movies that just doesn't really fit to, especially on Letterboxd. But this movie, mad. Like, seriously, the implications are huge in this film. That's something I picked up a lot on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why they don't just, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. It's weird how forward this movie is in some directions, but in some directions it's not. Like, I don't know why that's such a hidden thing in this film. Or like why it's openly implied, their relationship, I guess.
Mm-hmm. In a time where Hays Code doesn't exist.
Yes, yeah, okay.
Yeah, the idea maybe being of, again, kind of this mentality of the things not shown are almost as important as the things shown on screen. When you're in a time where the conversation quite literally is right now, are there too many sex scenes in film? Are they necessary? Like, that's a popular discussion on film Twitter or whatever right now. How do you make something sexy and still do something new with it?
That's fun. Like, the big thing on film Twitter basically right now is like, how do you have sexy scenes without just being purely male gaze about it, basically? It's the whole...
No, what I meant is there's this discussion of films nowadays have too many sex scenes and that the sex scenes are unnecessary. So it's interesting that this movie kind of, tries to make sex a major topic without showing the sex.
That's fair. They have one other note too from before actually that moment, though. I don't know. It's just another dig. I'm shitty. I'm just a shitty person about this movie. During the beach scene, talking about not knowing what tennis is just reminded me of Whiplash, but shittier.
It does actually. I also had to at some point think about Whiplash in this movie.
Did you? Yeah. There's some moments about it. Yeah.
I think the way it plays with building tension, there's similarities between this and Whiplash. But yeah, it's interesting that we both got reminded of Whiplash for different reasons in this movie.
I mean, just the drive of, ambition to be the best at something.
Yeah, that's also true.
Fighting your own physical limitations. This specific moment I was talking about was just how pretentious she was being about not understanding tennis. And literally the scene was like, she was like, that's why you're not actually playing tennis. And he's like, what?
Yeah.
She's like, you don't actually play tennis or whatever because you do this. And I think there's literally a scene in Whiplash where he's like, that's why you're not actually drumming. You're just banging sticks on a fucking thing or something like that. It's just like, it's funny. You're talking about the sex, all the sex stuff. I guess at the heart of this, I don't understand why so many sports movies are tied to eroticism. I get it in a way, like sweaty, working physique, body moving. I get that to like a lot of primal degrees and stuff. But it just doesn't, I don't know. Something about it in films, just those two things don't click together to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in this movie particularly, the movie is so much about power dynamics and about being the one in power, and
Yeah.
it's in this case that's really the reason. And the duality, like binary nature of tennis, as I already pointed out, the fact that in tennis the only time when it isn't binary you have doubles, so like two people standing on one side, like it all perfectly works out as various little metaphors for the relationship. In this case, I don't know as like a general that's not really a general answer.
That's why their threesome failed.
Yeah, for sure. Like that's part of it. A third party can't be involved. It's either 2 or 4 in tennis.
That makes sense.
And they make it very overtly clear that to them, relationship is like a tennis. Tennis is like a relationship.
She foreshadows, I guess, then you could say the entire movie in that threesome scene by saying that, she, using her sexuality, she drives them to engage with each other at that moment. And then later, her sexuality, their sexual attraction to her, drives them to play each other.
Yeah.
So she kind of foreshadows that whole thing, I guess, in that scene. On top of the power dynamics or the binary nature of tennis, I don't know if you've played tennis.
A little bit for like a year when I was 7.
Despite being a ghetto kid, I lived with a tennis court like less than a block from my house for like a while.
Mhm.
And I played a lot of tennis growing up. One of the big things about tennis is when you play, that's what makes like a really, really good game, is when you can see control happening on both sides. Both people are very in control of the moment.
Mhm.
Most of the time in tennis, one person is leading essentially, and the other person is defending
Yeah.
that, right?
Acting and reacting.
Yes, exactly. So tennis already is kind of a power play in itself. The actual act of how tennis is played is very reflective in that, the power battles in this movie.
Mhm. I also I want to talk about the most clear visual storytelling in this is the holding the ball to the center of the racket. The thing that art does subconsciously before every serve, which becomes a shorthand between them, like this little hidden communication of, yes, I fucked Tashi. On the rewatch, I recognized, first of all, that Luca Guadagnino shows it pretty much in a close-up earlier on, that art does this. So this is established in one of the very first shots. And what I thought was more interesting is Tashi also does this. When we see her play, when they watch her play, she does the very same thing of putting the ball to the center of the racket. I believe throughout this whole movie, actions are both driven emotionally and through the tennis, which again would work with the whole tennis is a metaphor for sex scenes. To me, that having both Tashi and Art do that kind of serve before they get to know each other, in my mind shows that Art will be like the one winning Tashi in a greater sense. Like they are not fighting for the match really, they are always fighting for Tashi. Because even on an emotional level, they are more aligned than Patrick and Tashi is.
That's fair. I mean, there's a reason why one of them, had kids and one of them didn't.
Mm-hmm. A visual that my roommate picked up on when we watched this together at the beach scene, when she mentions she's not a home wrecker, she is sitting on a rock and the imagery is like exactly like a mermaid sitting on a rock out on the sea. Like the sirens that attract the boats and make them crash into it. Like that famous imagery. It's exactly framed like it. She really looks like those sirens, those mermaids sitting on the shoreline. I didn't realize that, but
The siren just wants to consume them, and in this, mythological sense, literally eat them. In this sense, she wants to use them to create good. I almost said soccer. Good tennis to consume, to watch good tennis.
Yeah.
That's all she cares about. So I don't know. She's still very much just that's I don't know if bad faith actor is is a good term. That's not what she is. But she is. I mean, that's the problem though. Is like I hate everybody. Everybody's the antagonist in this movie.
Yeah, and to me, like
the
I
game of
think
tennis was the protagonist here.
the binary nature of this whole setup is the biggest antagonist. Like if they want each
that's
other.
why I said she is actually. That's actually why I said she is because they're the binary nature. They're the doubles. They're the two people, right? And she's that third outside influence that isn't supposed to exist within tennis.
Interesting, because I look at it as the rules of tennis are the problem. Like maybe there's a world where those three could be a happy throuple, and just
as the polyamory angle, huh?
Yeah, because they have feelings for each other. They work together. They had sexual experiences with each other, even the boys, even before Tashi. Both like her. She likes the control over all of them, obviously. Like, that's the thing getting her off, really. You know, the threesome in the beginning is not about her having sexual needs. It's about her controlling these two men. Maybe societal rules, as in the rules of tennis as a metaphor here, being the antagonist, the main antagonist, I guess. But yeah, they are all assholes. You're right.
I like that outlook. And I want to remind the listeners that you would know nothing about hippie clothing.
Or polyamory.
Yeah, or polyamory. Nothing about that kind of stuff. I don't know if this is like the point of the movie. Obviously not. I don't know. There's parts of me that wonder if there's any meaning to the idea that these two guys were really happy before she showed the fuck up. And there's some homoerotic undertones to them. And clearly you find out that they're not just undertones, right?
Yeah.
They have their whole makeout scene. And it's the only scene in the entire film in which you see two people kiss passionately. Ever. Right? And it's them kissing each other.
You see Tashi and Patrick kiss in that one. Like there's a few scenes where it's almost a sex scene, and then we as the viewer and Patrick as the protagonist gets blue-balled in like the pre.
You are right. Okay, you are right. But to further, the end of the movie is them technically embracing, right? So I feel like there is a lot of undertones that these are two guy. I don't know. There's just a lot of undertones that they were supposed to be gay, I think, more than anything. And that they are driven apart by her. There's just a lot of undertones to that. To me, that's what the movie's trying to say, is that these two dudes were supposed to have that relationship. And maybe you talk about the A's code and stuff, you know? Might have connection into that, why that they don't, you know, why that's an alluded thing only.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this movie plays a lot with the idea of almost self-inflicting the Hays Code upon himself.
All this makes me respect the movie. I still respect the movie. I do respect the movie from the beginning, and this makes me respect it more. I still didn't think it was entertaining.
A lot of the like entertainment in the direct like tennis scenes just comes from the presentation in combination with the soundtrack, sound editing and stuff like that. The presentation in a way really builds up and goes harder and harder the longer the movie goes on. The first time we see a tennis match, it's like the most basic way you could portray it. It almost looks like a live TV broadcast of a tennis match. And the camera gets weirder and more experimental the further we go on. Ultimately, like within the last scene, obviously going super hard with the camera becoming the ball,
being the ball,
the FPV shots. I love that so much.
I hated that so much. The breathless yells. Oh my god, the breathless yells just back and forth.
Which
this is terrible.
I mean, yes, but again, tennis equals sex scene. That absolutely plays in.
I get it, yeah, and it definitely sounded like a sex scene. Definitely sounded like a sex scene. What does it say about me if I like movies when there's sex scenes, or like if a movie's gonna be like sexually charged, it should just be sexually charged?
I don't know. You're not a man of subtlety.
I'm not. No, I'm really not. I'm not that at all.
Yeah. And obviously, like the final one being the clear court, and we're looking at it from underneath. Like all of that is so awesome to me. It's weird because at the same time, I think of this movie not as a tennis movie, but I also think of it as the final definitive tennis movie. Like, what else is there left now for anyone to ever portray tennis in a special way in film?
So many still. So many still.
Like, yeah, story-wise, sure, you could make so many things out of this, but purely the cinematography side of how can you visually intensely portray tennis, I feel like the craziest ideas are all already in this movie. Like, this almost is to me the definitive final enigma tennis film.
Well, I mean, I think the Under the Glass thing is taken from a basketball film.
Oh, there have
if I'm
been
not
been
mistaken.
various under the floor
Yeah.
portrayals of different things before.
Yeah.
But I still love the way it's done here.
It's a very sexually charged sports movie. It's a double entendre. Get it, doubles?
Yeah. There's also the structure kind of being like a tennis match. We're jumping back and forth in time the way the ball jumps back and forth on the court.
It's very back and forth. That's fair. Yeah, that makes total sense. The music, I think, was interesting. I think I was hyper aware of the music because somebody else who I knew that didn't like it mentioned that they raised their score of the movie simply because the music in the last 10 minutes of the movie they liked so much. So I was just kind of just waiting the whole movie to be like, well, what's that music? This movie kind of uses some like synth wave soundtrack type stuff, you know, type, you know, moments and stuff.
Mhm.
Now that's kind of unique for a drama film about tennis and not fucking. That's, you know, kind of unique. But is it also just that that's kind of the directions that music and scores have been kind of heading in a lot of movies lately? I feel like it's just becoming more and more normal across a lot
I know
of
what you
types of
mean. Yeah,
films.
more electronic stuff being put into general normal scenes,
Yeah.
quote unquote. I can see that.
Yeah.
Still, like, even if this is where we're heading, this movie is way, way, way ahead of where we're now.
It's helping pioneer that. Yeah. I was just asking if you also felt like this is not just this movie, but this is a thing that's starting to happen.
I can see that, yeah. It's for sure going into that direction a bit. There's hints. I thought the way it is used was amazing. Like, I couldn't even tell you exactly why it worked so well for me, but just on paper, hearing the description of we're making a scene, two people having a dialogue and an angry discussion about their relationship, and we're gonna put a techno beat over it. Like, that shouldn't work. To me, that sounds like something that would absolutely be a mismatch and wouldn't work tonally. But man, was I invested in those dialogue scenes. And in a way, it's kind of it felt like to me almost like dialogue scenes in Tenet, but done right. there's similar loud, heavy pushing forward soundtrack choices whilst slow scenes are unfolding on a plot side in Tenet. And in Tenet, I had a real problem with it where I thought it didn't match. It also blocked, like the audio mixing was horrible in that, and I couldn't understand anything. I had no problem understanding a single word here in this movie. It just, yeah, I don't know, it works. I can't tell you why.
Anytime something does Tenet but better is a win in everyone's book.
Yes.
but no, but I definitely it's again, it's the power play because the music changes just the last bits of the film's tennis match scenes.
Mhm.
The music will go from like to like do like pretty quickly. It'll do time
Halftime, double time. Yeah.
yeah, whatever the word is, which shifts. You know what I'm talking about, though.
Mhm.
it does this kind of frequently. I bet you that the slow dialogue scenes are led by faster music, and I bet you the faster paced scenes are led by slower music. And I bet you that's the emulation again of one item having the visual or the audio having the power play in that scene.
I could see that. I tried to look out for when exactly the music plays and when it comes up. My main takeaway this time was that whenever one of the boys feels, or one or more of the boys feels like they are fighting for Tashi in that moment. As an example, that second sex scene that is almost about to happen and then it doesn't, with Patrick and Tashi before her game where she gets the injury. In that scene, the music starts exactly after the question that Patrick asks of, I thought I won the game. Am I still fighting for you? And that's the moment the music kicks in. In like the final match, I'm pretty sure the moment he holds the ball to the center of the racket again is a moment where the music really kicks in or like steps up a notch. So like I guess the second person in that moment realizes, oh, we're still fighting for Tashi. So that music is
It's like it's the Eye of the Tiger. Like Eye of the Tiger is like the build up. It's the fight music, you know, fighting for the in the traditional sports film.
Yeah.
It's that for this character. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And yeah, I guess I just have two final things. First of all, if you haven't seen it already, I will probably put a link to this in the description, but there's pictures online of how they shot the scene with the knee injury. Horrible scene, like the audio visuals, the sound design of that. I flinched so hard. Anyways, it's kind of insane. They built basically the lower half of the body of Zendaya as animatronic. And it really looks like they just ripped apart Zendaya. It looks so awful.
When it actually pops.
Yeah, when it pops.
It's for when
itself.
it pops. Okay. I thought you meant when for I see you just posted in the thing. Okay, because my thing was like when she's sitting on the ground and her knees fucked up looking, that looked really good. But the actual popping and breaking part scene, right? I mean, dude, I come from horror films and I come from skateboarding.
To me, it
was
awesome.
okay. I don't know. I was like, oh shit, because that sucks, and she just fucked her career up. I don't know. That's funny.
Yeah, it's
Man,
interesting.
that much work into that fucking scene? Really? Come on. You could have done better. Could have done better than that. But I'm happy you like that. It really weirds me out that there's just an entire bottom half of a Zendaya out there.
Yeah, I know, right?
I really hope that was disposed of in the right, proper ways, bro.
And
like,
not just sold to a weird fan or something.
Yeah.
I know my exact thoughts.
God, that's... God, I hope she got to keep that and fucking lock it in the fucking basement somewhere or something. It goes up so high.
Yeah, I know. They must have planned to maybe have some wider shots as well of it, and then they just decided on the close-up.
They're just going to reuse it in every movie she's in from now on. She's always going to get injured from the waist down somehow.
And always in that position.
Well, next movie, it'll be like a slash open to the stomach or something, you know, like...
Yeah.
minor retrofits to it to make it just work every movie.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much my side on challenges.
Yeah. I'm happy to have seen it. I won't lie that I was dreading to see it. I often think that expectation has a lot to do with how you'll reflect on a film and how you'll, take in a film. I might be biased because I wasn't interested. I didn't think the movie was bad, though. A lot of movies like this, I would have been like, that was garbage, or it was shitty. I just thought it was stupid. This isn't bad. I can respect a lot of these things, and you've opened up my eyes on a lot of things on why I can see that they're good, what that means, like what is good about those things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I never want to watch this ever again.
Fair enough. I will for sure return to this guaranteed. In the next appointment, we will venture into the world of religious horror.
Our first prescription is the 1976 horror film The Omen by Richard Donner. The film follows Damien Thorne, a young boy replaced at birth by his father after his child dies at birth. As the years go by, mysterious events begin to happen around Damien that lead his family to suspect his origins and intentions. The Omen won the Oscar for Best Score and was one of the highest-grossing movies in its release year. The film stars Gregory Peck and Lee Remick as Damien's parents and Harvey Spencer Stevens as Damien himself.
The second prescription is The First Omen. Released this year, The First Omen is a prequel to the original 70s Omen. It is considered a modern reimagination of the nunsploitation horror subgenre and apparently works through themes like sex and religion and how those are in conflict with each other. It is set in Rome and directed by Arkasha Stevenson.
If you don't want to get spoiled for either of these films, make sure to check them out by our next appointment 2 weeks from now.
I'm George.
I'm Devyn.
And this was your Medicinema. Really sorry to interrupt George from the editing room here with a short little update. The next episode is going to be postponed for 2 weeks, so it's going to release 4 weeks from now. I'm going to be on holiday and Devyn is currently moving and we couldn't arrange a time that would fit for both of us to record this episode. But that's it. We'll be back 4 weeks from now with the Omen movies.